So, good morning everybody. My name is Johannes Orphal. I'm head of Division 4, Natural and Built Environment at KIT, and I'm also the chairman of the Scientific Steering Committee of this conference. This conference, Transforming Towards a Sustainable Society, Challenges and Solutions, is new in many aspects, and I will talk a little bit about later at the end of this session. So thank you very much for coming here, because this is not a fixed format. We could not use an existing address book or something to invite everybody again to a conference. It's the first of its kind, and it's a great pleasure to see you all here, and many more will come, because it's a dynamic conference. As you will see, we have about 150 participants and about 70 contributions, 25 posters. But before we start with the scientific program, I would like to invite our Vice President for Digitalization and Sustainability here at KIT, Professor Dr. Kora Kristof, for officially opening the conference. Please.
Dear Mayor of the City of Karlsruhe, Mrs. Lisbach, dear Mrs. Klingenmayer, Professor Orphal, dear members of Scientific Committee of the conference, dear members of Organizing Committee of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. It's a great pleasure for me to open the conference Transforming Towards a Sustainability Society, Challenges and Solutions. On behalf of the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, I warmly welcome you all. We are very pleased that this conference is now taking place here during the KIT Science Week, and that you, dear guests, have traveled to us from places all over from Germany and from abroad. To present your contributions to a sustainability transformation, to share and exchange ideas, concepts or solutions for sustainability across fields of expertise and across communities. My heartfelt thanks go to all those involved in preparing and organizing this event and making the conference possible in the next 3 days. As a large research and education institution, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology is in permanent dialogue with its stakeholders in politics, science, industry, and the public. KIT communicates science and its findings to citizens, but also receive impetus from the society and integrates it in our work. Dialogue with society is one element of our mission as University of Excellence. As a measure to foster the transfer of scientific findings and the communication to science with society, the KIT Science Week has been introduced 2 years ago. It combines a scientific conference, we are here, from international researchers with events for the public. The first KIT Science Week took place 2 years ago and focused on the human in the center of learning systems. This year, the conference is under the motto, Making the Future Sustainable, Together. The 2023 Science Week is also about sustainability and climate protection. Researchers from all over the world will discuss the latest developments in climate research. During the Science Week, students, citizens, children will gain exclusive insights into the diverse facets of research. Whether it's a keynote, a panel discussion, a dialogue with citizens, a guided tour from open laboratories, there are opportunities for everyone. By history, Karlsruhe is all well-chosen location for this conference. Here, discoveries, developments, innovations have had impact and made a difference on the development of the society, and that, in part, in the same time, brought new grand challenges. Karlsruhe, for example, is the place of groundbreaking discoveries. Heinrich Hertz succeeded in experimental proving electromagnetic waves here in 1886. Also in this town, in 1893, Hedwig Kettler founded the first girls' high school in Germany. In 1900, the Grand Duchy of Baden became the first state in the German Empire to regularly open the state universities to women. Karlsruhe is also the place for the German Informatik 50 years ago. And in 1929, the KIT was founded here as a merger of a technical university and a Helmholtz Research Center for the first time in Germany. Just to mention a few. It has been here that scientists sought and found answers to the scientific challenges of their and our time. And so we are glad that this conference here in Karlsruhe and during the Science Week is approving challenges and solutions toward the sustainable society. Sustainability and climate protection has already embedded in the KIT's mission, knowledge for society and the environment, for many years. And KIT now brought the topic of sustainability into focus in view of the major challenges we face. We have expanded our umbrella strategy to include the field of sustainability, and we have changed our management structure. Since the 1st March, I'm Vice President for Digitalization and Sustainability, a new resort that we founded. And it's the possibility to have the topic of sustainability on the high and strategic level in research, transfer, teaching, and our own sustainability performance. We deliberately want to put the topic of sustainability into an academic context and think together two major transformation processes, the digitalization and the sustainability. A path that I'm looking forward to taking together with you at KIT. KIT is already active with great commitment in researching and realizing sustainable development. Let me list a few examples for our research areas and the fields for the implementation. Later, my colleagues will present many research results in detail. We are working on sustainable mobility, Energiewende, climate neutrality, sustainable food systems, sustainable digital solutions, and via our large-scale research infrastructures, KIT make important contributions to the systemic views. Real-world labs, our specialty, offers a modern and highly topical form of applied research in exchange between science and society, focusing on learning and implementing in an experimental environment. One example for this in the field of teaching. Our Roof Kit project won the Solar Decathlon Europe in the last year. It's the world's largest university competition for sustainable urban building and living. And on the solar campus in Wuppertal, the team of researchers, students, and external partners built a full-scale demonstration object. This can also be visited. If you have a little walk, it's a building 30.79. As a university, KIT is of great importance as a multiplier and as a training center for future decision makers. We were therefore very pleased that the Federal Ministry of Education and Research and the German UNESCO Commission awarded us 2022 as a place of learning for education of sustainable development. For the multitude of our sustainability-related educational offers and activities. It's KIT's goal to further develop itself as a place of learning for education for sustainable development. And our students contribute very constructively to sustainable development. As Vice President, Digitalization and Sustainability, I would like to emphasize that digitalization and sustainability are fundamental transformations of this time. Here at KIT, these two important topics for the future have now been combined in the executive board level, and this is very important for us. We are glad, thankful, and proud that KIT scientists actively contribute to sustainable development and sustainable digitalization. Yet, transformation to the sustainable society is a complex challenge that we can master only together. In dialogue, cooperation between science, politics, administration, industry, and civil society, we are very active. This conference during the week Transforming Towards a Sustainable Society will bring together scientists, interested experts from various fields of sustainability-related research, technology, innovation, economics, and politics. Again, I'm deeply convinced that we can master challenges only together, in cooperation, in partnership, local, regional, global. I would like to mention just a few. Joint national and international research networks on cross-cutting topics in research on climate, environment, energy, and society within the Helmholtz Association and its national and international partners. The second, EUCOR, the European campus, is an alliance of universities on the Upper Rhine area that practices cross-border cooperation by development joint projects, maintaining an open dialogue, and sharing ideas and experiences on the day-to-day basis. Its aim is to utilize the university's combined forces to tackle the major challenges of our time. The Innovation Campus Sustainability, this year founded by the state Baden-Württemberg, is a joint initiative with the University of Freiburg and KIT. And the guiding principles are transforming the city, regions for the future, climate protection, resource conservation, and well-being. And the two universities strive for comprehensive social, technical, and economic innovations together with a network of science, business, politics, administration, and civil society for the great transformation. Last but not least, here at Karlsruhe, the 8 Karlsruhe universities agreed on the climate pact with the city of Karlsruhe 2 years ago. The Climate Pact pursues the goal of implementing the Paris climate protection goals and the Karlsruhe climate protection concept for the year 2030, locally in Karlsruhe, bundling knowledge and utilize our synergies. At the same time, it serves as a platform for jointly development projects, exchanging experience on climate protections, and have a lot of teaching in this field. We are very glad that you, our partners, also are here today at Karlsruhe at this conference, and we thank you also for your commitment for this conference. We need collaboration, we need fruitful exchange of ideas and dialogue across stakeholders. We need combining competences for sustainable development. Therefore, again, my heartfelt thanks from KIT goes to all partners of our academia, industrial partners, the Federal and State Ministry, the City of Karlsruhe, culture institutions, organizations of the civil society for cooperation, and also for your commitment and support in tackling challenges, finding solutions to transform our world in a sustainable world. Thank you all for your presentations and contributions for the conference and for your discussions in the next 3 days. Use this excellent opportunity to exchange and share your ideas, and thanks again to the Scientific Committee and Organization Committee for making this unique conference happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kristof, our Vice President for Digitalization and Sustainability, for these beautiful words, for opening this conference. one of our biggest, if not the biggest partner, I think, of KIT is the city of Karlsruhe. You see, the campus is within the city of Karlsruhe, and the KIT and its predecessor, the University of Karlsruhe, would have not developed without this support of the city, also in terms of sustainability and climate change. So it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome here on the stage Mrs. Bettina Lisbach, our mayor of the city of Karlsruhe, for addressing a few words to all of us. Thank you, Ms. Lisbach, for coming.
Yeah, dear Vice President Professor Kristof, dear Mr. Klingenmayer, dear Professor Orphal, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, on behalf of the city of Karlsruhe, I have the pleasure today to co-inaugurate the Science Week conference Transforming Towards a Sustainable Society, Challenges and Solutions. The ecological transformation is a collective task to the whole of also urban society, and as a municipality we have established multi-phased links with the KIT in the area of sustainability issues. We very much appreciate having a range of specialists for manifold issues, and that we can rely on your expertise in many areas in the context of sustainability. Various joint projects have already been implemented between the municipality and KIT. These include, for example, regular lectures on urban climate protection and climate adaptation during the Climate and Environment Knowledge Week this July, as well as our participation in various events during the KIT Science Week in this autumn. We are keen to embrace such opportunities and to present our activities during your events, and at the same time we gain insights into your areas of interest, which is very useful for us. We also greatly appreciate that KIT joined the Karlsruhe University Climate Agreement. Professor Kristof already mentioned it, the Klimapact. In the scope, Karlsruhe's universities and the city of Karlsruhe mutually reinforce one another in their climate protection activities, and this exchange between the partners involved creates synergies for the implementation of climate protection measures and provides new ideas and impetus for all of us. Particularly in the dynamic field of climate protection, it helps us to look beyond the end of our noses and into the realm of science. In addition to climate protection and climate adaptation, we address other sustainable issues. To face this challenge, Karlsruhe has mapped out the mission statement of a green city, and several strategic goals have been identified as priority theme of the green city, such as improving the quality of life in a green, health-promoting environment, maintaining the good quality of life also for future generations, protecting our natural resources, and achieving climate neutrality by 2040. All these principles will determine the City Council's actions too, and administration and City Council have launched groundbreaking plans and resolutions, as for instance the Climate Protection Plan for the time period up to 2030, the Karlsruhe's Climate Adaptation Plan, Biodiversity Plan to protect our biological diversity in the city, and numerous activities to maintain and develop urban green spaces. A wide range of activities throughout the city administrations also deal with sustainability issues. There are, for example, working groups for sustainable procurement, for sustainable mobility, or sustainable construction. In addition, we are currently finalizing our energy master plan. The strategy paves the way to a climate-neutral electricity and heat supply in Karlsruhe by 2040. In all our efforts, we depend on the support and cooperation of citizens and of the whole urban society And this is where also KIT is an essential partner for us. And so for the inauguration of the Science Week conference, Transforming Towards a Sustainable Society, I wish you many successful, exciting, inspiring events. And yeah, now I look forward to new approaches and lively exchanges also today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lisbach, for your inspiring words. It's also a pleasure that tonight we will have our conference dinner at the Center of Art and Media here in Karlsruhe. And for those who don't know it, it's really a center that has a worldwide visibility and is also part of the German UNESCO portfolio, as we will hear later. And this, and maybe also because KIT was selected as the first German university as an educational place for sustainability teaching, Bildungsort für nachhaltige Entwicklung, last year, we will have the General Secretary of the German UNESCO Commission tonight, who will address a few words during dinner to us. So I hope you will like it. Because we are very thankful to ZKM as a partner for hosting us tonight, I would invite Mr. Tobias Klingenmayer here on the stage to say a few words about the ZKM. And you will see it is a very interesting building, just like this one. And I will say a few words later about this building. But now the floor is yours, Mr. Klingenmayer, please.
Dear Vice President, Ms. Kristof, dear Mayor, Ms. Lisbach, dear Professor Orphal, dear participants, thank you very much for the invitation. We feel very honored that the ZKM is part of the advisory board of the KIT Science Week and that we can welcome you all to the conference dinner tonight at the ZKM this evening. Transforming Towards a Sustainable Society, Challenges and Solutions. Over the next days, you will look at this topic from a scientific and technical point of view and discuss the challenges and possible solutions. But what can the contribution look like from an artistic scientific point of view? And how can we as cultural institutions, how can we as Center for Art and Media accompany and support society on its way to a more sustainable society? I would like to give you a brief introduction. Just as scientists develop thought experiments when their ideas are ahead of the state of the art or the sensitivity of the instruments available at the time, our former director Peter Weibel and the famous philosopher Bruno Latour have developed the format of a so-called thought exhibition, Gedankenausstellung. With this new form of representation in which art, with its imaginative aesthetic power, plays a central role, the thought to find answers to key existential questions. One of these so-called thought exhibitions was Critical Zones, Observatories for Earthly Politics in 2020. The title is based on the term critical zones, which in geochemistry, biology and ecology refers to the thin surface of the Earth where living organisms, soil and water interact. In Latour's view, focusing on critical zones seems much more appropriate to the challenges we face on Earth than viewing the world as a blue planet. As the world situation is determined by developments closely linked to the blatant ecological transformation of the geosystem, the exhibition addressed the issues of growing inequality, the migration crisis, geopolitical conflicts, and the rise of populism and nationalism. The aim was to make planetary grounding, as Latour calls it, a public experience and to sketch out a new earthly politics by asking artists, historians, philosophers, scientists, and activists about their ideas in the context of the critical zones. This is just one example of what an artistic scientific approach can look like and perfectly reflects our new director Alistair Hudson's concept of a useful museum, which envisions artistic and cultural institutions as centers of social responsibility and transformation. And of course, dealing with these issues at the macro level had a huge impact on the ZKM at the micro level. It was the starting point for us to ask ourselves how we as an institution deal with the issue of sustainability. A green team was formed from employees who made suggestions about what we could do in terms of green culture. The green team is now institutionalized and a green culture working group has been established. We have produced our first carbon footprint, managed to save huge amounts of energy by optimizing our technical infrastructure, and are trying to promote sustainability at every level of the organization. But there's still a lot to do. I would like to conclude my brief introduction with a warm invitation to all of you to visit our current exhibition, Renaissance 3.0, a base camp for new alliances of art and science in the 21st century. Today, both disciplines are increasingly working with the same tools, methods, and programs. This common pool of tools points to the beginning of a new renaissance which becomes visible in the exhibition. Finally, I wish you an inspiring conference with lasting insights and congratulate KIT on this fantastic program. Thank you very much and see you tonight, and there I give you a few words on the building and the ZKM in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klingenmayer. So I think we are all looking forward to visit ZKM and Renaissance 3.0. I will close this opening part of the first session with a few words on behalf of the Scientific Steering Committee and also the local organizing committee. As I mentioned before, this conference is the first of its kind in several aspects. First of all, it is the first conference in frame of a KIT Science Week that we can hold in presence, because 2 years ago there was also KIT Science Week, but the conference was totally virtual because we could not come together. So I'm deeply touched to see that we managed it, because one of our greatest fears was that this pandemic would rise again and that we would be in danger for making this possible. So to prepare this, just in case you understand, first we have a lot more seats available, and you will see people coming and going, so please protect yourself. But also we will record the opening session and all plenary session on video, and we will not stream it because it's not required, so thanks for being here, but we want to put it on YouTube next week. So for all plenary speakers, if you do not wish that your talk is provided to other interested people from next week, please let us know, but I think it would be also an important aspect that this material is available. So it's the first President's Conference, Science Conference in frame of KIT Science Week. It is also the first, I have to change, wait, no, it's good. It's also the first sustainability conference as such at KIT, and it is only organized here at the premises of KIT, but it has been prepared by a team from different universities in Europe, and I would really, really thank from all my heart the Scientific Steering Committee from the universities of Freiburg, of Strasbourg, of Basel, Mulhouse, Haute-Alsace, Thessaloniki, Vienna, I hope I did not forget anybody, but for organizing this conference, because this was really the basis to make it possible and to make it so multinational as it is now. Indeed, it's a very diverse conference, not only from the nationalities which are here and also our backgrounds, the topics, but also the way we try to organize it. It is really open. And this is why we also wanted to organize it here. You have probably remarked that this is a special building. This is our old mathematics Kollegiumgebäude, well, where the students go in and out, where we have seminaries. The semester had not yet started, so you see just a few students coming to the library or so and working, and these are mathematicians, so they will not make a lot of noise. But the building has been completely renovated 10 years ago to make it a closed space in order to allow this kind of meetings. So at the same time that it's an open space and it's also a protected space, as you see, well, it was a bit cold this morning and I know, but it will warm up during the day. And there's no special heating here in this part now because we will be warmed up by the sun. And the same is true for the light, if you just look at it. There's very few light. There's a little bit light here on the scene and a little bit light there where it's not enough light to see some. But if not, it's just the natural light that comes into it. And there are many little aspects like this in this building, including thermal protection and so on. So just have a look. You can find descriptions of this building on the internet also, because it has been awarded 10 years ago, an award for sustainable architecture. And it's a building here at KIT. So we hope that we will have more buildings like this in the future here. When I thank the scientific committee, I would also like to thank the local organizing committee and especially the team of the KIT event management who are there and who have made possible that, you know, everything is perfect from the technical side. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. Don't ask me, but ask them how you can upload your presentations or where you can find your badges and so on. And besides, since I mentioned sustainability aspects, you have probably been told that on the back of your badge, there is a free ticket for the public transport in Karlsruhe, which is valid for the whole week. And you will also have noticed that we have not printed the program, but you can find it on the internet. You have internet access here free in these rooms. And if you want to look at the program, you will find the QR code, so you can download it at any time. Before finishing my more technical remarks, so I would like to say a few words also from my point of view about the scope of this conference, sustainability, and in particular, the transformation towards a sustainable society, challenges and solutions. It's a huge transformation. It is so big that we can hardly imagine how we can achieve it. But on the other hand, we really have to do it. And to make this clear in our mind, we will have also a presentation by Scientific Rebellion tomorrow morning in our first session. So I hope you will come and have a look also at this. But it's really urgent, it's difficult, and it is only possible when many, many disciplines and people come together. And to be clear, it has been said that, you know, society has to unite behind science. And I agree that it's not possible without science, but it's also not possible without the whole society, politics, economy. And this is why I'm extremely happy, and this is also first of its kind in this particular area, that we have very strong, competent, interested industry partners here that you will later see in this session. This is really unique, and these are huge companies from this region here who will talk to us how they address this transition to sustainability. It is not possible by science alone, and it's not possible by politics alone. And in economy, it's becoming a big driver. Just to conclude this transformation, we do not call it a revolution. You may remember the Industrial Revolution, where science played a huge role, the Digital Revolution, where science played a big role. But for this sustainability transformation, I think we also have to use a new model how to organize this transformation. And this is what this conference is about. And it is a unique format also that we have all these different experts from different disciplines together to talk to each other. So please use this open format to go to talks you would not think you would go to usually. Listen to things which are new to you and you may not perfectly understand. This is what this conference is about. Learn a common language, how to address this transition. And with this, I would really now like to end the opening of the session and come to the scientific part. Thank you very much for being here. The conference is opened. Now, we will come to the first part, which is session A, and I am chairing this session. And session A is transformation towards a sustainable society, the scientific dimension. It was not easy to select the speakers, but when we had them, it was very clear that we had the perfect speakers for this session. And as you will see, these are the best experts around for the topics that they will talk about. Our first speaker comes from Hamburg, Professor Daniela, and she is the director of the Climate Service Center, Germany, GERIX, which is also part of the Helmholtz Association of Large-Scale Research Centers. A little bit about the background, not too much, but she's actually a meteorologist by education and studied climate sciences. She has studied in Darmstadt, but then went north to Hamburg. She is also professor at the Leuphana University in Lüneburg, so those who know the Leuphana know that it's really a leading university in sustainability in Germany. She has been lead author on the 5th assessment report of the IPCC, of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. She has been member of the EU Mission Board on Smart Cities and Climate Adaptation and Mitigation. And she has been for a long time also a member of the program board Earth and Environment in the Helmholtz Association. So Daniela, it's a great pleasure and honor to have you here, and we are all looking forward to your talk. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very nice introductory words. Can you please display my talk here? So, thank you, Johannes. I'm very pleased to be here today. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to talk a little bit about the science dimension, and my talk is, I would say, in two parts. The one part is about the knowledge which we have and the background, why transformation towards sustainable society is so important, and I, as a climate scientist, will of course look at this from a climate perspective. The second part is a bit more on research gaps. We will hear a lot in these 3 days about what is happening, and I think that's very important, and that's also the challenge we have, because we have many little activities or big activities in very, very different sectors, dimensions, disciplines. But the transformation towards a sustainable lifestyle has to cover all of it. And how to organize this, if at all, how to prioritize, if at all, is still open. And these are those questions where I think science plays an important role in order to support the way towards the transformation and the new lifestyle. So let me start, and I have to look, unfortunately, into this direction because I do not know all my slides. Yeah. Ah, there they are. Okay, then I need my other glasses. That's what I expected. Yeah, age, huh? You know. Ah. Okay, so let me start, and I go here, and you see me full. So let me start a little bit with the IPCC. And of course, that's where my main change happened. I am a meteorologist, I'm a climate scientist, but when I was involved as a coordinating lead author in the 1.5 degree report, I had the opportunity and the pleasure to understand and work on the full system. And the special report is different to the individual reports because it is written like a book. It has 5 chapters, in a way, kind of an introduction, scenarios of the future. Then it has a climate dimension. Then it has the dimension about impacts, risks, and then we come to adaptation and opportunities. So it's really like an interesting book. And it covers the systemic view. And that's why I'm very strongly connected to IPCC science. And the synthesis report, which I would like you to look at, states that current trends are incompatible with a sustainable, equitable world. And this is the synthesis reports, you know this. IPCC is not doing its own science, it is synthesizing the scientific literature, which comes out through the last 5-7 years. It also says that scientific advances have resulted in a better understanding of our future. And here the first introduction into science is there. It also says that taking action now will make a difference. And it says it is still possible to build a livable and sustainable future if we act now. And this, what IPCC, and that means what the scientific community has worked out in the last years, is through climate resilient development. And this is a word of the future. Climate resilient development is the way towards a sustainable lifestyle. In addition to the scientific dimension, and we come to this later. There are, of course, the options, the low-cost options, the feasible options to reduce emissions, and, of course, the financial and political dimensions which are known. We just have to do it. What else do we know? The IPCC, as I just said, has this key concept now pushed forward of climate resilient development. You know, beforehand, we looked at risk as a risk propeller, which was the three components connected: the climate hazard, the vulnerability, and the exposure. Now the new concept of climate resilient development enlarges this concept by looking at current trends and changes and looking at options for the future. And you can see it here where we now connect, if we have the technology working, the climate change impacts on the human society and the ecosystem, including biodiversity. And if we bring all this together in a kind of climate resilient development, we are ending up with human health and well-being, equity and justice, and that is exactly at the heart of sustainability. What do we also know? We know that the global temperature will rise if we are not stopping emitting greenhouse gases. And here you see where we are at the moment. You can see here on your left-hand side the possible scenarios, mitigation scenarios in blue, business as usual in red, and we have a span, the option to get a warmed globe up to 4 or 5 degrees by the end of the century compared to pre-industrial times. On this side, and I like this website, the Climate Action Tracker, very much, you can see where we are at the moment. Here we are roughly in this, by the end of the green, where we now have warmed about 1.25 to 7 degrees compared to pre-industrial times. And then you see in the pledges of the different, of the international community. And you know, at the Convention of the Parties, the COP meetings every year in November, December, the international United Nations come together, they talk about all their measures, all their plans about reducing emissions, and the pledges which you can see here lead to, you can revert them into global warming, lead to a warming of at the end of the century of something between 2.5 or 2.7 degrees, and if we would like to not cross the Paris Agreement threshold of 1.5 or 2 degrees, we have to be much more active in reducing emissions. Let me allow one German sentence in here. Pledge in German means Versprechen. In German, it also means Gelöbnis. And the word Gelöbnis is in German with a different notion than the word Versprechen. And I just want to remind you that this is what we are talking about. So we will hear end of November, beginning of December, where we are with this. In addition, the next fact we know is, I just said, the globe warmed up by about 1.2, 1.27 degrees. You can see here how the global warming would look like until the end of the century, and here on your right-hand side, the different bars are the different emission scenarios, which I just showed you, the blue to the red. The low one is with a strong mitigation, and the upper red one is with business as usual. And now, if you find now where you have been born, then you can see how you experienced the warming in your entire lifetime. And what you clearly can see, if you were born here somewhere in the 1960s, 1970s, and you are now maybe 60, 70-year-old, you experienced a warming of about 1 degree. That's not so much. Weather is more or less like it was before. But if you look at those who have been born a few years ago, or you will be born this year or next year, and then look at the century when they are 70 years old, they goes through a global warming change of 2, 3, 4 degrees. And this is a global mean. This means it's an average over the globe. If you look into regions and local dimensions, this looks completely different. So if you look at Europe, a global warming of about 2 to 3 degrees mean in Europe means 6 to 8 degrees in Madrid. So just to give you an idea of the difference, the regional differences. So it's very clear that people who are now facing this change are living in a very different climate, or will live in a very different climate, unless we are managing to decrease our emissions, to stop fossil fuels immediately, and to lower and stop the global warming. Stop, I don't think we will be able to do it, but let's say try to reduce the level. There's also another interesting dimension to this, and that is that in science, which will go into the next IPCC round, the first papers appeared on mental health and climate change. And they cover, on the one hand, the disastrous extremes which we see all over the world, but they also cover information. For example, if you look at Lancet, they cover information about the fear people have now living in those changes, and the fear which they feel coming from climatic changes and from this drastic change. And there is clear evidence that if you have experienced decades of stability, you are much more resilient to change, and you are not as anxious, at least if you grew up in this. Maybe people adapt to fast changes, I don't know, but it's very important to understand that climate change is affecting all our areas of life. We are affected not only our infrastructure, traffic, food, but also our health very strongly. And this is one aspect I wanted to share with you. There's another one, and that's the human cost of global warming, which I find incredibly important. This paper by Tim Lenton et al. Came out in April this year, and I really can only ask you, look into this paper. It's the first paper of this kind. You know that we are living in a temperature niche. If it's too cold, we die. If it's too warm, we also die as a human being. I mean, that's as it is. So that also means the niche is regionally fixed, I would say, and with climate change, it is changing. And this, of course, can lead to major migration. I would say climate change is a final drop in a dedicated situation for people to leave. But it also says that we already have about 10% of the population who has already been out of this climate niche. Depending on your adaptive capacity, depending on your financial capacity, of course, you can extend your range a little bit. But if we look until the end of the century, and you saw the pledges which I showed you, and you see that we are around 2.7 by the end of the century, then we will have 20 to 40% living outside of this niche. We don't want that. We really don't want this. And we need science to support ways, to find ways to get not into this disastrous situation. It means 3 of us are kicking the 4th one out, so you can now see which side you start counting. What I really liked and what I consider as important for sustainable development is the paper by Johan Rockström and 30 other authors, also from spring this year, who has extended the idea of planetary boundaries to Earth system boundaries, including the human dimension. And I think this is, again, the next step from, let's say, climate and climate change and environmental protection towards the sustainability dimension. And the stability and resilience of the Earth, of course, is closely connected to the human well-being. And they now try to have another constraint in this concept, which is to avoid major harm from human beings. Now you can argue what is major, is it the justice concept, is it correct, is it not correct, is it enough or not? For sure it will create a lot of science. And this, I think, is what we need, because it is important to understand where our safe spaces, safe and just spaces, and when we are crossing those Earth system boundaries. And they have been crossed now much earlier if you have the human dimension in this as is extra boundary conditions in your concept, than if you just would look into planetary boundaries. So you see, science is important. Science is also important to understand the connection to our economic value. So now let's look at Europe. You know that we have we also face climate change in Europe, for sure, and there is a lot of information around what you might expect, and more heat waves, more droughts, more heavy precipitation, winds. I'm not going into this today. But I think the connection to economic impacts and GDP loss of heat stress by country, that's one of the factors making economy getting interested. Because it is clear, it's very clear. If it's too hot, look at Europe. We had 30, 40, 50 years ago, we had in the southern part of Europe, in the middle of the day, a break. Now everyone works from 9 to 5. And if it's getting really warm, you either in the midday, then you either need a cooling system, which needs electricity and I don't know what, hopefully no fossil fuels for air conditioning, or it lowers down your effective working ability. And others can show and showed in science that, for example, the increase of warm nights, tropical nights, that's how we call them, more than 20-degree warm, will impact your efficiency of being able to work on the next day. So we have a direct connection between climate change and economic well-being. Here is also the role for science. The next role for science is, of course, how can we avoid to get into the worst scenarios? And that's, of course, in reducing emissions. Let me talk for a moment about mitigation. So first of all, we have to avoid emissions by reducing energy and land demand. And we heard a lot about the technology which is being developed and which we really need to test, and we have to be technology often here. The second is to reduce residual emissions through decarbonization strategies. And I think this is also at the heart of sustainability. And the third one is to compensate for residual emissions by removing CO2 from the air. And I'm saying this because here at KIT there is also a strong group working on this, because we have to look into carbon dioxide removal technologies. And the carbon dioxide removal is needed in order to balance, to get the net zero balance when we have reduced all emissions which we could reduce. And there's a lack of science and technology how to do this. How to do this efficiently. There are few ideas, decentralized, centralized ideas. The COP will now start to find ways to connect the negative emissions to the emission trading systems. Who actually gets a benefit if you take out CO2 of the atmosphere? Is it where you are taking it out, or the one who blows it into? I don't know, released it. So there is a lot of unknown. There are many unknowns in this, and we have to get an understanding about how much and how the technologies we will need. Where are they efficient? Where can they be installed? Where are the challenges? Where are the benefits? Where are the hurdles? And where are the negative impacts and the positive impacts? Here from the Helmholtz Climate Initiative, the net zero, we made a calculation until 2050. If we are able to reduce as much as possible, we still have about 50 to 70 million tons per CO2 per year, which we have to balance somehow. And if you look closely, then you can see that only something around 18 to 20% can be taken out by natural sinks. And of course, we have to increase the natural sinks. We have to look into peatlands, afforestation, and land management, and so on. But we will never be able to make it only with natural sinks. So we have to be very clear here in the technology side, and research has to be at the forefront. In Germany, we are, I would say, not at the forefront in this aspect at the moment. There are other countries who are pushing a bit more, so there's room for improvement. We also looked into technological lever and decision supporting systems, and here again is room for improvement. I think the role of science to support these changes, these transformative lifestyles, and also to support decision making is huge. It's huge, it's important. I would say it's more important than ever at the moment. We have to bring all this information into the cities, and you're working on cities. I mean, this is not really new. We know about in city planning since decades about the positive impacts of blue and green infrastructure. Under climate change, some of those have negative impacts. If you look into infectious diseases, for example. If you, on the other hand, think about climate change affecting urban settlements with heat waves, but also with mold, because with the time period in Germany in fall and winter and spring between two rain events is shrinking. This means that the buildings cannot dry anymore. So there are many different facets which have to be implemented into this, and that's again where in the systemic approach there's science still needed to understand how to do this, the implementation in a solid CO2 less or zero way. Zero will not be possible. In addition, we need the sustainability framing. I'm not talking about this much, but we heard already from Kora about the engagement and of all actors, and I'm very glad to see that you're here as mayor of the city. You're so engaged, and you have the Karlsruhe Climate Act. I think this is really fortunate. And we need forerunners on the field, so I can really thank you and encourage you to go on. But let me talk a little bit now about the challenges for science, and then before I end. So the German Committee Future Earth, which is a committee of the German Science Foundation, the DFG, has published a position paper, which we have published, I think, a year ago. The members of the committee, we are 8 or 9, have worked through some of the topics which we currently consider as major gaps in sustainability research. There are others, of course, but I would like to share those topics with you. And I will go through them now a little bit. It's a little bit a lot of text now, but I think it's important to get those major fields. We did a community consultation to discuss with the national and international community those topics, and we are feeding them into the international sustainability research so that we can also work in collaboration. So there are these 6 topics. That's approaches and goal of sustainability research, so the theoretical basic knowledge behind it, the sustainable development, transformative changes. We talk about scales and the cross-scale difficulties. There are major gaps, extreme events and resilience, food systems, and dietary transformations. The paper is organized in a way that there's a bit of introduction with a few key messages, and then with some major questions to the scientific society. I will not read through all of them, but give you examples for them. So here, for example, it's the first one on the basic funding, basic methodology and theoretical basis. So I think it's important to understand that reflections must address topics with reflected philosophical ethics. And I'm saying this here because it clearly shows that we have this very technological, and I just talked about the technology on direct air capture and others, Energiewende, plus the human dimension. And to bring this together is still a challenge, and the research must not shy away from this ethical and epistemological discussions which we need. So there are questions which we think need scientific answers, and I just want to point you to one here, which is what is the relation between specific SDGs and theoretical concepts of sustainability? Can strong sustainability, inclusive wealth, and the SDG approach be synthesized and concealed, or must one decide between competing paradigms? Still not answered. We are working on this since many years, but it's still not answers. So, and you find other questions here. The second on scales. Scales are challenges. We go from the local scale or the micro scale in the corridor of streets, for example, in the city, to the global scale. And the cross-scale activities are so important to understand who is the actor, who is the driver, where are the boundaries. And I think it's important to focus on the scales. And there are, for example, questions which need to be worked on is, for example, what is the role of the spatial, temporal, and functional space in terms of determining feasibility and effectiveness. A measure which is effective on a regional scale might not be effective on a local scale at all. We have to think about this a little bit, and there again is room for interdisciplinary research. And there are many others, of course. The third one I want to talk about is the connection between extreme events, resilience, and health and well-being. And I think this is, it is in the focus of many scientific activities at the moment. I would say everyone works on extremes. Not so sure that makes sense that everyone works on extremes, but there is a strong focus on extreme events. Understand, predict, project. The connection to resilience, to adjust, to be able to work with those changes is an importance, and this is directly connected to strengthen the health and well-being, which in itself will strengthen social cohesion and individual well-being. So there are these interactions in it. Here I would like to point to questions like, and of course you will download the report and then read all questions, sure. So here I would like to say, for example, how are resilience, the third one, and social cohesion mutually interlinked? And how does this change in the case of extreme event? I think this is so important to understand our today's crisis, not only on a climate scale, but what we experience at the moment with the extreme events, I would say, which we have, the crisis situations in Europe and abroad, and on top in climate and finances. It's so important to understand the linkages to social cohesion. The next one, which I consider as very important, and I think it's a little bit under-researched still, all the connections have not been made, I'm not fully sure here, is about food systems, biodiversity and health, and the anthropogenic changes and human health. So you know, you can probably not read this, but you know we have some consumption and technology and demographic underlying drivers. Then we have ecological drivers, climate change, global population, diversity loss, land use and land cover changes. We do have some proximate causes which are interplaying in this chain, which could be like food production, could be air quality, could be access to fresh water if you want to produce food. And then we have the mediating factors, governance, adaptive capacity, philanthropy, technology, and then we have the effects on health. So we go all the way, and we have to think about this a little bit, all the way from the soil and how we work and manage our soils to the human health, to the nutrition. And this under climate and environmental changes. And I think it's very important to understand this entire chain of linkages, and here, of course, are questions like the first one, what transformations of land use systems will enable us to cope with the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and linked to this, the crisis of the global food system. Or another, since the common agricultural policy is the main driver of land use in Europe, how can the common agricultural policy be adapted to the objective of making the EU a net zero emission system in 2050. So again, here is research and scientific knowledge absolutely important to progress in these fields. And there's one, I think it's one more slide I have probably before I end, and this then goes into the dietary transformation towards sustainability. And this, of course, means dialogue, discussion with people, change in lifestyle. And again here, how can crisis lead to transformation in diet and health? Is it via individual change and or political change? How do we do this? How do we take everyone with us? How do we not leave people behind? There are questions like, how can sustainable diets be tailored for different target groups? Which population groups should be addressed? And how can different groups be reached poverty? I would like to, before I end, say one more thing here. If you look into the literature, we have a lot of information about the changes in the C4 crops. And now these are those crops which are, let's say, the basis of 80% of our crop food, putting it simple. So there are now the first papers out since this summer who analyzed time series of the change of the nutrition and protein content in these crops. And it goes down with an increase of CO2. So it's not a climate effect, it is just the effect of the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere changing the reactions and actions in our crops, grass crops, I mean in all those plants, and they change in a way that the positive protein and nutrient content gets less and less and less. What you now see in the time series is that cows, for example, who are grazing in those areas where the change in this crop protein load has changed, are malnutritioned. So you can even go further if you look into 1 kilo meat 50 years ago and today, it has a very different level of food value for the human being eating it. Almost no one is looking into this. The first scientific papers are out since this summer because it takes a long time series to watch this. But with statistically valid method, you can show this now. This means that we are running into a nutrition crisis. If we think about our food, which is 80% of those plant-based food is affected by this. And you can, of course, compare this, and we know this, if you look at marijuana, for example, or if you look at other plants, if you put CO2 on them, they change their effectiveness. We know this. It's not a new thing, we know this. But no one thought about it. It's not climate change, but it's change which is important for a sustainable lifestyle and feeding the globe, which is caused by the increase of CO2. I'm not a specialist here, so don't ask me later how this works. I cannot tell you. But I wanted to point you to the fact that there is another problem in the back, a silent problem, which is not upfront in the discussions at the moment. And we have to think and need scientific solutions what we want to do here and how. And that's also one of the reasons why we have to lower down CO2 in the atmosphere. We have to lower down CO2 not only because of climatic changes, but also because of changes in vegetation. So the position paper says, concluding here, key sustainability concepts require constant reflection and probing. This is very important. It's not the one and only. It's not we will not be able to have the solution and then we are done. It is a continual learning process. It's a changing process. It's a dialogue process. We must be much faster in bringing our scientific knowledge into use, into society, and share this knowledge with the non-scientific knowledge, with the knowledge of the practitioners' knowledge, the knowledge of the communities, the cultural knowledge, the setting in which we are. Questions about justice need to be considered, and I don't want to go through all of them, but I think it clearly shows that there is, although we did our best in science in the last decades, and we have reached major steps forward, and much more we know about the systemic approach, there's still room for the scientific dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for this fantastic talk. And we are not out of schedule because we have a little bit of buffer, so feel free to ask a question if you like. We have microphones here in the corridors, so please stand up and use the microphone.
Matthias Wansen, YOCO Chair on Water and Sustainability. My question concerning the justice is about the non-human beings. Is it also considered in these plans, because there is this other species, the non-Homo sapiens?
Yeah, I did not talk about it, and in this position paper, where we think the foci of the next few years for mainly sustainability research in Germany is they are not explicitly considered, but connected to the One Health. To the One Health concept. So I would say it is a very important question which you're saying, and it's very important to address it. But we had to pick a few topics, and there are many others which are very important. I think the non-human being justice debate it's not strong enough. Let's put it this way. And I also think it will increase. I hope it will increase in the next years. Yeah.
Another question, please. Take the mic here, or you. Yeah.
I also would like to thank you for an excellent speech. And what I really would like to stress is, of course, in Europe, we are already very advanced. We know what has to be done, and it's not much that we can improve, I'm afraid. The problem is more in other continents, especially the sub-Indian continent in Africa. And to me, governance is maybe the prime issue here. And my feeling is that we simply go worse and worse. The crisis that we experience will not help, and I discuss with you, migration to me is a very important issue. Yeah. As long as we don't find ways to solve these, could we really hope that sustainability will prevail at the end of the day?
No, I mean, we can hope, but it will not help much. I did not say this, but in all of our chapters is the international dimension and the Global South dialogue mentioned. So it is not focused on Northern Hemisphere, I would say. And I did not mention this explicitly, but I think you're of course tackling one of the most important points, and that is the international, I would say, international dialogue, international joint work, joint transition, and the understanding of the different concepts, cultural settings, and with this, the governance. And I'm glad on the one side that the topics go into the International Future Earth dialogue, so that we at least get a scientific, get a scientific collaboration. I really think we do not get enough funding for international collaboration from national funders in Germany, and it's a bit different to the EU, but I think there we need much more effort in the international dimension and in the dialogues. And when it comes to the dialogues which are triggered by the COP loss and damage concepts, connect the disaster risk reduction to climate change adaptation, develop the national adaptation and mitigation plans in the Global South, bring in adaptive capacity, development. So I mean, there is so much which we have to do jointly with the others, I would say, and that is a very important point, and migration is an important point, Research on migration, I think, is very important. I would like to see more different concepts and methodologies, so more theoretical basis there, and more knowledge sharing.
There's 2 more questions, not too long, please, but yeah, there's room for questions. Go on.
Yeah, thank you so much for this talk. I'm a postdoc at Darmstadt, and when I saw the different research questions you raised with this group, I felt like it was really interdisciplinary research questions, and my concern is I feel there is a tension between the urgency to find some outputs in the scientific area on those topics, but also the time it requires to build scientific interdisciplinary teams to help researchers taking the time to understand other disciplines. And I feel there is a tension here between the time it takes and the urgency we have.
Yes, it's a good point, but and you're right. The interdisciplinary research often needs more time because you first have to find the same language, but we are not starting with interdisciplinary research. I mean, we are doing it now since 20 years at least, and there are really good communities, and the mutual learning has raised our ability to work together. I think what is not efficient enough is to bring in new people into this. So maybe the university curricula, and I mean Leuphana is relatively nice setting, I would say here, but maybe there we need a bit of a push. And I think what is nicely developed is the extension of the PhD duration to 4 years and the extension of the project durations which go beyond 3, 4, and 5 years. In order to take this, let's say, startup phase for dialogues into consideration. By the end of this year, there will be a paper coming out by the Swiss group on new funding programs, which I think should be of interest for you, because the idea which is now being discussed in the international science funding and in the Belmont Forum and others is not to fund the project anymore for 3 or 5 years, but to fund a network for 10 or more years, in which then the network is preparing calls for individual projects jointly with stakeholder or whatever dialogues and integration is needed. And that will give us more time on the one hand, but it would also speed up processes. And I think that's a dialogue and an interesting new idea. Also, the European Union is looking into this. I really like this concept, and we always need this kind of fast track and the long breath.
I would say one last question, please. Yeah, come on.
Hello, my name is Gauri Shankar, and I'm from Institute of Technical Chemistry, KIT. And it was a wonderful presentation about the global warming and all these factors. And one of the most important thing you mentioned about the food quality, what is going to affect about the grains and also the farm animals and the meat what we eat. In addition to the CO2 effect, I also deeply worried about the mass production, which is very important nowadays, because even, for example, farm animals, there's no space even to a small walk, a little bit walk. So how can we really expect exactly the same protein content or nutrition content what we had in the past? The same thing with the soil, because the soil has been reused and the plants are then too close to each other and there is no quality at all. So I mean to say that these factors also should be very big influencers when it comes to the quality. So I think we need to consider this as well. This is my point.
Absolutely. Full support. I fully agree.
Thank you. It was a very good comment. Thank you very much, Daniela, for your talk and answering the questions. Now, with some considerable delay, but one of the later talks has actually been cancelled. I will come to this later. But we have a second speaker in this scientific session, Professor Anke Weidlich from the University of Freiburg. Anke Weidlich is Chair for Control and Integration of Grids in the Department of Sustainable Systems Engineering, INATEC, in Freiburg. Actually, she made her PhD at the University of Karlsruhe. She studied industrial engineering, energy economics, and energy policy, and she is a member of several important boards. I just mentioned the board of directors of the Smart Grid platform here in Baden-Württemberg, on the board of energy informatics. So she will talk also about energy in the sustainable scientific dimension. I'm very much looking forward to your talk, please.
Yeah, thank you for this very kind introduction and also for the opportunity to give one talk here in the starting phase of the conference. So as you already mentioned, my research is on energy systems and also looking at very technical aspects of it, technologies that we need, and also the implementation and integration of different renewable technologies and other technologies. Today, as we have the broader view on not only on energy, but sustainability at large, of which energy is, of course, a very important component, I would like to share with you two pieces of research which I find insightful also at the meta level, like what are we doing research about, how are we doing the research, and what do we need to do research about in the future, and in what way, so that we can tackle sustainability issues in a more holistic way, in a broader sense, and see the links to energy more strongly. One piece of research is a bit older, though not too old, although the feeling sometimes arises that it's older than it actually is. We did some research on energy systems scenarios and evaluated them with regards to sustainability categories. And this is mainly on environmental impacts, but also on social and economic impacts. And there have not been so many studies that actually did that. And we selected predefined scenarios, which were formulated by larger research groups for the German energy system in this case. And we assessed them in retrospect with respect to sustainability criteria. And one observation, I already mentioned it, is that the studies that we looked at, they are much less than 10 years old. So they have been formulated a couple of years ago, and yet they seem already quite old in the targets that they are addressing, so the goals that they should achieve, and also in the scope of what they are looking at. And this has changed enormously in the last years in the energy system research, an observation that I made in the last years. So the target that they addressed was for 5 of the scenarios that you see here in the summary, to reduce CO2 emissions, and this is only on energy-related CO2 emissions, not other greenhouse gases and non-energy emissions, by 80 to 90%. That was already a large challenge at that time. It still is. We haven't achieved it yet. But looking at it from the perspective of what we want to achieve now, this seems still quite tiny. We also looked at scenarios that had a more ambitious goal of 95 to 100% CO2 reduction, and even that is much less than what we look at today, where we take the whole economy and the CO2 neutrality goal for this into the perspective. And what we see as one interesting result is that, while not surprisingly, there are many co-benefits of decarbonizing. So reducing CO2 emissions goes along with a better score in many of the impact categories. What you see here in the middle is in the circle. The darker circle is today's system at the time that we did this research. So the current system's impacts on different impact categories. Here only the environmental, others came into other analysis. And then the impacts of the scenarios that we looked at. And what you see, and this is not surprising if you think about what sustainable energy systems, here mainly renewable energy systems, look like. They require a lot of renewable energy, and these are land intensive. So land use is one of the impacts in which we have much higher values for the CO2 reduction scenarios. And the second one is that it's very resource intensive, so materials and metals are used much more for serving the energy demand that we have. So these are the two categories in which there's clear stronger impact, while in the others there's largely co-benefits because most of the values are in the center, and low values are better because it's about bad impacts. But some of these scenarios also go outside of the reference of the current system at that time. And one thing I'd like to mention here is that the solid lines all represent the weaker ambition scenarios, while the dashed lines represent the more ambitious scenarios. And we see that especially the high ambition scenarios go outside, in some cases, of environmental impacts of the circle representing the status quo. That means, of course, we do not only have co-benefits, but the challenges become larger the higher the ambition, and also the difference between different approaches and scenarios of how we can achieve that, because there are also scenarios with dashed lines inside the circle. And if we want to combine the different impacts, including also economic and social aspects, into some sustainability score, I know that this is strongly debated whether this makes sense at all, but if we do it with the given approaches for weighting the different criteria, the conclusion is very similar, that the low ambitious scenarios are more similar to each other and have scores. So here now higher values means better because it's a score. They have comparable scores, and some of them seem to be very good, while the right side, the more ambitious scenarios, there are some that are much worse than even the worst low ambition scenarios, and some, or here in this case only one, is better than the best on the left side. What is seen from this is mainly that the life cycle perspective is very important. Scenarios are usually formulated for reducing CO2 emissions during the operation. This is the goal, and they do not take the life cycle perspective. This is usually what, as if policymakers, for example, ask for scenarios, how can we achieve this and that CO2 reduction target, they ask for only the operational. And the life cycle perspective plays a crucial role because you see, like here in blue is the category of climate change. And some of the scenarios have a very high score, as we would expect. Climate change is addressed by these scenarios, but some have also a surprisingly low score because they require technologies that emit a lot of CO2 when manufactured. Well, this is of course also a methodological issue because we need to take a prospective LCA approach, looking into, okay, what will be the CO2 intensity of the energy system in the future when we build more of the technologies. This is not considered here yet, but still it shows the strong importance of the life cycle perspective. So this is one piece of research, and I would draw some conclusions later when I also presented the second piece of research. This is a scenario study that we did on our own in an expert group, which was part of the so-called ESIS project, Energy Systems of the Future. Here is the study that we conducted, which was presented earlier this year. And we created an energy system scenario for achieving climate neutrality in 2045. So just the question how we can achieve this goal that we officially have given the climate law. We did that in a larger analysis, and of that we also, this is the larger analysis, and the document here shows some recommendations or policy discussions that we made out of it. And we also evaluated existing other scenarios that had the same goal, so climate neutrality until 2045, a few also until 2050, and the older goal. So here again we see the goal is always getting stricter, and this is also because we didn't advance quickly enough. So the more time it takes, the more ambitious is the remaining path we need to take in order to reach also to meet the Paris Agreement goal, for example. Here's one snapshot of the expansion of renewable energy capacities that we consider in this study. We also formulated core messages. I would briefly summarize them and come to a few of them later. Overall, we consider that it's like reaching climate neutrality is much more than just changing the source of our energy supply. That's quite obvious. So many levers need to be moved, and this covers large areas of political changes also that are required. So we need a political and societal realignment in order to achieve what the goal that we have. And what we also want to stress, and I will focus on that in a bit more detail later, is that demand reduction, which is usually very unpopular and which most energy system researchers and also policymakers try to avoid, these demand reductions, we find them quite necessary for reaching the goals. Without demand reductions, it would be much, much more difficult than it already is. We'll come to that later. Strong acceleration is needed. I think this is clear for everyone here. We also looked at the industry, and there said that a triad of strategies is necessary for the industry to become carbon neutral, including the processes themselves. So because there's a lot of process-related emissions that need to be mitigated in the steel industry, for example. In some industries, that's also not possible, and then we need a combination with carbon dioxide removal, which was already mentioned earlier. And this is also the fifth statement, that without this carbon management and including carbon dioxide removal, climate neutrality cannot be reached. I'll come to that also in a bit more detail later. Yeah, what summary can I draw from looking at the meta level of these studies? On the one hand, I think the statement is true to say that this holistic view on energy systems or sustainable energy systems from other aspects than only CO2 emissions is still lacking. And there are, of course, studies that look at this, but what we do not see and do not have the methods for is this overall optimization of energy systems with regards to these other aspects. There's, of course, also a discussion whether this can be done, like to optimize. This would mean that we can quantify all these sustainability indicators. But this is the standard of what we are currently doing when formulating energy systems. We optimize with respect to cost, given a target of CO2 emission reductions, and we do not look strongly enough at the other aspects, the resource requirements, and the environmental impacts. Of course, these are side discussions. There was a lot of, or there's a strong discussion currently going on critical resources. Where do we get them from in the future? How can we become more self-reliant or diverse in the sources of these resources for the energy system, but it's not integrated into the research about energy systems itself. And the life cycle perspective is still underrepresented, so we still focus too strongly on the operational CO2 emissions and impacts. And if we look at these, at the sustainability perspective at a larger scale, it raises the focus, or the focus must be placed more on all the conflicts that this can produce and the trade-offs. How the different resources are best employed in the system for the benefit of the society in the end. Resilience is another aspect that is typically not addressed, not inherently, but only in separate studies, and social sustainability is also under-researched. Another aspect that only starts to becoming more popular is this notion of circularity on all the materials, because in my opinion, a sustainable energy system is one in which we draw on renewable energy sources and also reuse the other resources that we use for it, because renewable energy are hardly relying on finite resources. And these need to be recovered and reused. And in some cases, so my personal feeling of the implication of that was always, well, okay, if we take recycled material, this is more energy efficient. If I melt the aluminium again, making new aluminium of it, this is energy efficient. But this is not true for all materials. For other materials, if you want to recover them, it requires a lot of energy that you put into this process. And this is energy amounts which are not taken into consideration in our energy demand assessments, although it must be a goal which is potentially as important as CO2 emission reduction. And so the whole thing must be thought of in a consistent way. And this is also true for what I termed here as carbon cycles, so getting carbon also, also CO2 emission, or CO2 out of the atmosphere. We heard about that before. If we do that with technical solutions like direct air capture, for example, this requires also large amounts of energy, which are typically not taken into account when we measure or when we estimate the energy demand. So this is certainly a task for us energy system researchers to look at this more specifically and more consistently. Yeah, another thing, I already mentioned energy demand. And the way that energy system researchers typically look at this is, well, it's something given, something external. We can project how the demand will develop given developments of the past, which we can just extrapolate into the future. And given the challenge to serve all the demand with renewable energy, of course, researchers also think a lot about how we can reduce that. This is not a new topic, but it's always something, that is solved outside of the energy system, so others need to take care of these demand reductions. And my feeling is that if we look at the triad of sustainability strategies, in the most popular sense, like consistency, sufficiency, and efficiency, then of course efficiency is always in the heart of energy system research. We assume that this will increase, new technologies will be more efficient than the old ones and help us in reduce energy demand. And consistency is even more popular because it's the question, which sources do we use? And the answer is renewable energy. So sustainable energy systems is largely associated with just renewable energy systems. So these two aspects are well reflected, but the sufficiency is typically not addressed, not actively addressed. And in my perception, it still has a very negative connotation. I just remember a discussion we had not even a week ago. There was a Commons discussion, like in the House of Commons, this debate style here at KIT as well, which discussed about aspects of the future energy system. And there was a very renowned researcher who said, "Oh, I don't believe in sufficiency because people will never accept being limited or like others telling them not to use more than a specific amount of energy or resources." So even among researchers, the sufficiency is seen as a very negative solution. Although, the way I would define sufficiency is not that someone puts a cap on what others consume and forbids higher energy demand. But it's also looking at what is the quality of, for example, mobility or living that we want to achieve, and how can we do that with less energy demand associated. But if you take this perspective, then the problem becomes very large, because we observe that, for example, if we look at buildings, we live on more and more square meter every decade, and reasons are, for example, in a country like Germany, that people, once their children grow up, just stay in their houses, although they are large enough for a whole family, but they're there alone. And this raises especially the square meters per person for old people. And it's not that they really like having so much space. It's just the circumstances, some of them financial, that prevent them from taking other solutions, even though they would be much willing and even prefer to live in a smaller house, because it's also much less work. So there is a lot of surrounding conditions that obviously are barriers for taking the right actions to live with, in this case, less square meters, also, of course, entailing less energy demand. And there are many examples for this also in mobility. But these are all aspects that energy system researchers do not really care about or look into. And therefore, it's like, okay, let's avoid this term. But if you look at it in more detail, like what is assumed as energy demand, you see that sufficiency plays a role in it, of course. And that's why I call it tacit sufficiency. So no one talks about it, but yes, we also assume sufficiency, not in this sense of forbidding people to consume or like having a lower quality of service, if you want, from the energy system, but rather to change the conditions in such a way that less energy is demanded. And sometimes this is made explicit and sometimes less. Sometimes it's modeled endogenously with own models. Sometimes it's just assumed as a fixed value. One example is that one scenario study for climate neutrality assumes that there are no domestic flights at all in 2045 in Germany, or that we shift a lot of our transport to railway systems. This is a suggestion that is very old, and still we haven't seen it practically. And of course, it's still one of the solutions, but it's the ways why we haven't achieved it yet and how to achieve it in the future are then not discussed. So if we take a look at the assumptions, we see that the left is the demand that is assumed for 2030, and on the right you see it for 2045 or 2050, and there is a considerable reduction at the final energy demand level, not only primary energy, what goes in. This reduces naturally if we have more renewables and less fuels, fossil fuels, but also final energy demand. For example, by less heating demand through sufficiency, but of course also efficiency measures. And here's another picture of which kind of energy demand is assumed to decrease. And this is mainly the fuels and the gases, the fossil gas, while there's also some forms of energy of which we assume an increased use, and this is particularly electricity, which is not surprising because renewable energy come in the electric form, if we think of wind and solar, so the main sources. But also hydrogen, of course, will play an increasing role, and district heating and, the environment heat, which is the basis for heat pumps. So yes, sufficiency is sometimes tacitly assumed in these scenarios, although it's communicated less, and I think it's really crucial to discuss the ways that we can, that make us achieve this demand reductions, not only through efficiency, because the potential for efficiency is always limited. And this is also what I want to address with this slide. So the past focus was really on the sources, and this is the easy part, because if you just expand renewable energy, everyone's happy. We have more of a certain technology, and that means a lot of new jobs, and it's something which we like growing an industry. But the current steps that are more important and that we address, or that we are only starting to address with all the conflicts that are around, are really in the sectors of buildings and mobility. So if we talk of hard to abate emissions, we usually think of cement industry, for example, where process emissions cannot be avoided, agriculture, waste, and so on. I find that hard to abate too, but not at a technical level, but because it involves the action of millions of people. It's individuals that have to take the right decisions, housing decisions, mobility decisions, not only at the technological level, do I install a heat pump, or do I take advantage of the fact that I'm still allowed to install a gas boiler, but also at the behavioral level. And there changes are occurring, but they are very slow, and the question is how we can speed that up in the right direction. For the industry, it's also like the scope of what we have to look at also increased very strongly. So to go over this quickly, it's also partly also about the energy demand side, but also about the consumption of products, for example. If we take here the whole manufacturing cycle with the different steps until we deliver a service that can be provided through a product, then we can actually think about ways for cutting emissions at all of these steps, including the very end, like how many services do we need of something and how many products do we need for providing the service. Now, a good example for this second last step could be car sharing, where you need less cars for the same service of mobility, but you can also, of course, address the need for mobility at the very end. And for a given demand, then all the manufacturing steps can be looked at, including circularity aspects and so on. I mentioned already this term of conflicts and trade-offs, and one very good example, I think, for trade-offs and also decisions that need to be facilitated from the very high-level view is one example for that is, what do we need the scarce biomass resources and hydrogen resources for in the future? It is clear that there is a limit on how much sustainable biomass there's available, and everyone sees it as a solution to its own problems, every sector. The industry wants to use it as a feedstock on the one hand, and also for energy purposes, like high temperature process heat. The building sector sees it as a solution. Well, why don't we burn wood to heat our houses? The mobility sees it as a solution for biofuels, for example, or also e-fuels that can take the carbon source of biomass. And it's clear that this cannot all be served simultaneously at the given demand with the scarce resource biomass. And a similar statement can be made about hydrogen, because hydrogen will be quite expensive and therefore also be available in a limited amount. And the question is, where is it used best? And this requires priorities, and it requires the systematic view, like from the above, and then to derive policies from it that steer the uses in the right direction. So here's just some illustrative examples of in which sectors where hydrogen or the larger term of molecules instead of electricity could be used. And there's some, of course, expert opinion and research on it, but how to derive the policies that lead to the desired outcome is still an open question. Yeah, and finally, it was mentioned already, we also need to do carbon management in a larger scope, and this involves carbon dioxide removal, but also other strategies like, for example, CCU, carbon capture and usage, so using it again as a feedstock for plastics, for example, or for e-fuels, or for any products that we now use fossil resources for. And why do I show this picture? Because it again shows that there's a lot of trade-offs and conflicts, because here, if we take the same example again of biomass, biomass can also serve a lot of the carbon management strategies. It can be used in combination with carbon capture and storage, and then it's a negative emission resource. So BECCS, biomass with carbon capture and storage. It can be used as a carbon source for e-fuels, as I mentioned already before. And this shows that there's, that it needs intelligent methods and policies to achieve the desirable outcome. And this is not only true for this one example; it's true for the for all the comparison of strategies, because conflicts are also there for land. If we take DACs, for example, direct air capture, this requires land and energy, which again, if we do it in a renewable way, involves new land demands for the renewable energy. So there's a lot of new perspectives that have not been researched about before. Yeah, so to summarize, I mean, I showed very many aspects, but I want to just summarize in three to address the research challenges that we should look at more closely, and that we should also interact with as energy system researchers. So as the former speakers, it's a lot about different disciplines working together, because the scope of energy systems, which is already large because energy is the basis for everything, the scope has increased a lot, and this requires new disciplines working closely together, understanding each other, and finding or discussing actually also these trade-offs and conflicts, and finding good solutions to solve them. And then it's clear that energy systems, which used to be a very technical topic, is not a technical topic only anymore. It's already for a long time. There's many non-technical aspects, but it's very important also that these are discussed together with the technical experts. And it's very important for the technical experts to ask the other, societal disciplines, researchers from these fields, and at the same time it's also important that social sciences ask the engineers and the natural sciences maybe for what is possible, and then solutions can be found together in collaboration. Yeah, and this focus on the trade-offs and conflicts is, I think, very crucial, because this is what sustainability research has always been about, how to reconcile all these different sustainability goals. We have so many of them, we want to achieve them at the same time, and this is also true for energy, even more so than in the past. So I hope this community here can contribute to some of the aspects, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you very much. And yes, again, there is room for some questions, if you wish. Karl Friedrich Ziegan, please, you start.
Yeah, many thanks, Anke Weidlich, for your presentation. And I have a comment and a question, probably. A comment, first of all, I really appreciate that you speak about carbon in the sense of carbon usage, carbon recycling, and therefore I think we should change our wording from decarbonization to defossilization. That's what we mean, which is my permanent comment, which I give everywhere. Then second, you speak about sufficiency. And I had the privilege to listen to your presentation as a German Physics Society, and we have a strong debate on that issue. There is a variety of opinions on that, because sufficiency could be reached voluntarily by behavioral change. It could be reached by the price, if it costs more. So some colleagues say electricity is still too cheap, but you cannot say it in a loud way. So, and third is restrictions and limitations. And that is, by the way, the reason why many of my colleagues estimate the difficulty to reach more sufficient consumption behavior. My question is now, what are you thinking about that? Can it be reached only by behavioral change voluntarily, by a better understanding, or do we need restrictions, limitations, legislation?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the two questions. Actually, the first, I also use decarbonization from time to time, but I'm aware that it's not the right title. It's still a very popular term. Regarding sufficiency and how to reach it, I was surprised about recent surveys that people seem to perceive like restrictions as quite a fair instrument. I would have, also the current discussion on the buildings law, for example, in Germany, is that people do not want that someone restricts use of a technology because they want to decide on themselves. But if they look at, okay, what would be a fair policy, then there is obviously an openness to these instruments because it touches everyone in the same manner, and it doesn't leave the side effect that rich people can just buy more and only the poor have to reduce. In our study, like the ESIS study, we also, of course, strongly advocated for price signals on CO2. So this should be the leading instrument because markets and prices are so powerful in making this, in solving these allocation problems. And if you just put a price on CO2, then the CO2, low CO2 technologies are, of course, have an advantage. In the end, well, the simple answer is that we need all of that. And CO2 pricing is the most important instrument, but if we rely on it alone, we can produce a lot of social issues which we don't want. And if, for example, these restrictions, if you forbid a certain technology, they can also be very helpful in gaining speed. It's very quick. And also, if you let people decide on the long run or for prices, on the basis of prices, then it might just take longer. And in the meantime, a lot more CO2 is emitted, which raises the pressure for the later decades. And so the mix is always the best solution, probably.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, please. Ayakachi. Yeah, please. There's a microphone to your left. To your left, anyway.
Hi, my name is Ayakachi, and actually I'm coming from social science side of energy policy. So I'm an associate professor in international political economy and energy policy at the University of Basel. So your talk was totally fascinating, and I'm really interested in the part you talked about policy goal conflict, or I would say coordination challenge. Mm-hmm. And I'm one step into the area of sustainable real estate. And for example, there is a clear upcoming conflict between indoor air quality improvement versus energy efficiency improvements, right? And it's a similar problem here. And now I have come to think that it's almost more challenging to initiate policy level coordination between different ministries. For example, Ministry of Energy and Environment, Ministry of Health, they have to work together to solve this sustainability problem. And then interdisciplinary research, where researchers from different disciplines come together. So do you have any idea how this coordination can be initiated at the policy level? For example, do we need a new structure, new actor, new ministry, or can we trigger one ministry to try to lead the coordination? I have no answer to this question myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is definitely a very important challenge. So politics is criticized for working in silos, and everyone is responsible for its own resort only and tries to get the best for this. We had this discussion recently in Germany when we discontinued the sectoral goals, which are more easily assigned to a certain ministry. And now it's an overall assessment of CO2 emissions, and only if the overall CO2 emissions risk of not achieving the target actions need to be taken. And I think on the one hand, of course, it allows for global strategies, more coordination. On the other hand, given the urgency and the low amount of, the missing time, it is clear that all sectors need to act immediately anyway, and there is not much room for one sector doing more and one doing less, and then the two compensating each other. And therefore, it's still, of course, a challenge to coordinate, and a CO2 price could be a very efficient instrument cross sectors. But it is, I think the priority should be on acting at all, and even if it's not in the best coordinated way.
There's one final question, if you wish, yeah, and then we have to proceed.
Thank you very much. Nika Scheid from the Chair in Economic Policy, so another social scientist. Thank you very, very much for the very illuminating talk, and I think I learned a lot from it. One question that I have also from a social science perspective is, of course, you mentioned the whole idea about energy demand needing to be reduced. And of course, many perspectives on this are given, and I think one of the most prominent one is that, of course, energy demand is distributed very unequally. Mm-hmm. In Germany alone, of course, but especially when we look at the global level. So how can we address this when there's literally, of course, countries where, let's say, growth in energy demand is crucial for survival? So what would be your take on this? Thank you very much.
Also, my first reaction is always like from a moral point of view that we should and we must go forward, especially here as a member of a rich society. And inside the rich society, then the richer people have to move forward. But it's unfortunately not what we see. There are some initiatives where rich people are examples, but also if we look into reality, it's still like high-income people set the standard for what others want to achieve, and we observe that they have a very high CO2 footprint, which which raises a problem that others want to reach it too. If I knew a solution, I should go into politics, and unfortunately, I can only give back the problem to you as social science researchers and policymakers. It is extremely tricky, I admit.
Yeah, so I think we have to stop here. Thank you very much again. And it also brings me to the point that we should really use the breaks also to discuss these things, yeah, because it's a very complex situation, and I'm very happy that you asked this question. We now have a transition here because we are very fortunate and happy that we have experts from industry leaders here with us, partners of KIT, largest companies worldwide, who are also very active in sustainability. So our first speaker here is Mr. Gunther Rothermel from SAP. If you don't know SAP, I must say a word, because this is now the biggest company in the world dealing with database management related to financial management. Just have a look if you wish. But what people also don't know is that SAP is also #1 for many years now in the rankings, and I don't like rankings that much, but in SAP is ranking in sustainability. It's really a top company also in sustainability. And Gunther Rothermel is the co-general manager and the chief product officer at SAP for sustainability. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for coming, and please.
Hello, thank you. Am I audible? Yes, I am. Yeah, very happy to be here today and to share the perspective of SAP, but probably even broader, to switch the perspective to the corporate world. So where are companies today, and what are they doing in this space of sustainability? So let me talk about that a little bit. And if we put ourselves in the shoes of commercial organizations, where are they today? And if I oversimplify this dramatically, there are 3 major drivers for corporations these days to invest into sustainability and to move forward. The first one is, I would call brand value, right? We are all aware that brand matters, and that especially also for newer consumer groups, it matters a lot of what sustainability aspects companies pursue, and that has been a major topic for many years now. And if you follow the news, almost all major companies have given themselves very ambitious goals themselves, right? So they published net zero goals. And quite frankly, behind the scenes, many organizations are scratching their heads and thinking of how the heck am I getting to these numbers, okay? But that's a different question. We'll tackle that in a second. So the brand awareness is a very important topic. The second one is regulations. Now, I apologize upfront for using this alphabet soup of abbreviations here, maybe if a little later, but there are many regulations these days either already in place or coming. And of course, that's a major topic for organizations. It's also a burden for many companies to see what am I supposed to report on, how do I do it, and especially for organizations who act on a global scale, this is very hard to follow. And we heard already before earlier, yes, Europe is leading here, and we have regulations like EU taxonomy and CSRD and others, but I wouldn't say that there's not a lot also happening in North America as well as in Asia. I was actually very surprised myself to see what's going on in China. I think China is facing an immediate need when you look at air pollution and other topics. So there is action going on, and especially in US also more regulations to come. The independent state of California has issued also regulations just recently. So there's a lot going on. But the third one, and the third driver to me, is one which has not been seen enough, both in the corporate world as well as even probably in the scientific world, and that's the competitive angle. So for many organizations in key industries, it is simply a competitive need to transform to more sustainable products. If you take the automotive industry, chemicals, we heard about construction, mill and mining. I would say if you fast forward a few years from now, will these organizations be able to survive if they don't have sustainable products in their offering, if they are not able to offer green steel, a more green cement? The answer is yes, but this aspect of competitive forces has been not seen enough. And me personally, this is just my private opinion, if we want to see change happening in the speed that we need it and at the scale that we need it, then this economic force has to kick in. And I was at UN Climate Week in New York 2 weeks ago. I was at COP27 and maybe also COP28 this year. And of course, things are not moving as quickly as everyone wants to see this. So I would say let's see that we can unlock some of the economic power which is there in many organizations. So what are we doing about it? And how are we dealing with some of these challenges? And let me first say, and thank you for your kind introduction, indeed SAP has been in this space for a long time. We have given ourselves ambitious goals as an organization to be a sustainable organization ourselves. But more than that, and that's what I will talk about more here today, is SAP also has we believe, substantial contribution to make to help other organizations to become more sustainable. Why is that? I mean, depending how you count, probably around 70% of world's transactions touch an SAP system. It might be plus minus a few percentages, but a lot of the business processes, a lot of the material move, a lot of the emissions which are created are somehow touched or related to an SAP system. So we believe we have a huge potential to move here. And this is why, and I will not again read out all of the activities we've been doing. We are part of many standardization activities of many bodies. We try to contribute here. But it must have been something like 3 years ago where I would say we made an all-in kind of move internally. We said we will build up more resources. We accelerate our investment on the product side. In other words, we are building digital solutions to address climate change, circular economy challenges, and so on. And I'll talk a little bit about that, not so much in the sense that I want to sell or pitch our solutions here. That's not my goal today. But I just would like to talk a little bit about what are the areas that we are tackling, what are we doing together with our customers, and where are we co-innovating here. Because we believe we need to act, we need to truly bring sustainability into the business operations of our customers. So that's what we did, and we are still on this journey. And if you ask me, is something happening? If you just look at the last 2 years, I would say the corporate activity, the sustainability implementation projects on the corporate side have massively accelerated. Massively accelerated. I would say out of the top 50 customers of SAP, I could not think of any organization who has no sustainability program in place. So it's happening. And by the way, for the students or people who are searching for a career here amongst you, it's probably not a bad idea to learn about sustainability concepts. It's one of the hottest areas in enterprise business, that's for sure. So when we try to hire, it's very difficult. Now, how do we address this and what are we doing? And again, if you put yourself in the shoes of an organization, what is it that you have to do, both in the world of climate or circular? First, you have to see that you get the data which you need. And here I'm at one of my key points right away. Most of the organizations don't have the data they need. And if it exists in the heads of some people, it exists in Excel spreadsheets, and then every time a integrated report is created, people sit together for 6, 7, 8, 9 months and try to manually compile this information. That is, let me say that right away, that's not a status we can stay on. Okay? It has to be enterprise class. It has to be subject to an audit. You have to prove what you have done because there's a financial impact, for example, of carbon. So this is very important. Getting a better data foundation in place is one of my key points I want to bring here across, and I'll come back to that in a second. So this record, how the heck do I get what I need? And by the way, a lot of data has to be created. It doesn't even exist in SAP systems. So we need to calculate product carbon footprints. We need to calculate waste reduction potentials. But then the second thing, of course, is the reporting. And let's face it, this will still be a major topic moving forward. Regulations make a big difference. I tell you one example from my private life it's not my private life, it's my business life. But when plastic tax was implemented in Spain, guess what happened? We have lots of projects all of a sudden in Spain having to cover plastic tax. So this sounds very obvious, but I'm also advocating some of the things also simply need to happen on the regulatory side. And I think it's about time, by the way, Germany has a plastic answer here as well. So reporting matters. And again, US with SEC and in Europe with CSRD. Don't want to get into the details, but it's substantial work for corporations. When you look at the documents, just read them. It's a lot of work to be done. And what we try to do in SAP is we try to pre-think as much as we can in terms of these regulations so that we translate this into software for the company so that they don't have to do all of the initial research and then just implement it. And then finally, let's assume you have such a data foundation in place, and when you did these moves, then of course you need to act. This is what has been called decarbonization, for example, a reduction of waste. And yes, a lot of organizations have goals, but we need to see more push on this act side of the house, really reduce things. And now the conclusion we are drawing as SAP, and that's my second point I want to clearly state here, is we believe sustainability needs to become part of the core business of our organizations. It has to be part of the processes when we procure things, when we make financial allocations, when we ship goods, when we produce goods. Sustainability has to always be a factor. And that's our vision. And of course, I'm not telling you anything new. This will not happen overnight. This is a transformation for organizations of years. But when we are able to achieve this, only then will we realize the reductions that we have seen and heard about in the previous talks. And somebody just mentioned this question of trade-offs, right? What do I do in terms of my sustainability activities versus what does it do to my business? Let's not forget there's money involved. So people need to understand, if I do this decarbonization strategy A here, what does it do to my balance? Am I losing money? Can I afford it at all? So this bringing closer together of financial information and logistics information and so on with sustainability, that's our goal. And on a marketing level, we summarize this under this term of reinvent the R in ERP. We started as a company as an enterprise resource planning company. That's what we did. That's what R3 was back in the 90s. And now we have to generate a new level, a new generation of resource management that includes precious entities like carbon, like water, like other entities. So that's our approach. Pretty ambitious. Will take us a couple of years to get there, but I would also say we are pretty much on the way. So what does that mean now? Sounds good, maybe you might say, but what are we really doing? And we have 4 areas where we implement this in software. And this is not a surprise. Every presentation I get from a customer basically has these 4 elements on the slide. So I could exchange these slides with the customer slides. So it's climate action with carbon in the center, greenhouse gas, of course, in a broader sense, but is key, no doubt, we heard about that. But the circular economy topic, I think somebody touched upon, is equally important. Just 2 weeks ago in New York, there was a talk by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Maybe you have heard that, very influential community around circular economy. When you look at the 1.5 degree goal, we've also heard in the talks before, where's that reduction potential coming from? There is roughly 55% of that potential is coming from energy transition, but material transition is also contributing with roughly 45% to such a goal if you simplify it on a very high level. And there's, again, a detailed study by the EMF on this topic. So circularity and the need to produce less packaging waste, to actually have more sustainable material in the whole chain is a key topic for us as well. And then we also heard in the talks before, the social dimension is very important for many reasons. It matters to be able to, drive our goals, but there's also regulation. There's the very famous or infamous Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz in Germany. There's other supply chain due diligence acts where you gotta talk about the social impact you have. So social in a broad sense, including health management, including other aspects, is also very important for us, and we actually have software to help companies there as well. And then finally, my key point, holistic steering and reporting. And I'm preaching also to a scientific community here, but I think you would all agree, if we have no data, if we have no visibility, if we don't know where we are, how can we steer? So that's why data and this new emerging data domain of sustainability is very important. We summarize our activities under this term of SAP Cloud for Sustainable Enterprises, but that's not all we do. We have work on the topic of hydrogen, we do work on the topic of biodiversity, although some of these topics are, of course, maybe a little earlier on the life cycle. Now let me quickly double-click on this topic of carbon. It was mentioned so many times. We have one philosophy internally, by the way, which we're also debating heavily, and I would be interested in hearing the perspective of the other presenters here on this one later. We believe that we need to move from averages to actuals. That's how we call it. Because currently, when you see what many organizations are doing, they are applying average values they get from some databases. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's better than doing nothing. And to calculate with averages is not bad. But of course, where you want to get to is that you, for example, calculate and manage a carbon footprint which is based on the actual production of that entity. So in other words, with which material composition has it been produced, in which plant, with which energy mix, and which transportation route behind it. I think you could already see that makes a difference, right? There you could see this is, you have a reduction potential versus an average. So that's a very important philosophy for us, and that's also what we drive on the product side. Now, if I stay, and I just learned the term decarbonization is maybe not totally accurate, but if we stay with this term, I also want to manage that hardly any organization these days can do this alone. Why? Because they purchase a lot of their carbon footprint from their suppliers. So if you take the automotive industry, 70% or 80% even of the footprint of a car is not even generated within BMW or Volkswagen or Mercedes. It's generated earlier in the chain, even going down to green steel and other entities, right? So people need to communicate, technically speaking, around this topic of carbon. Now, the surprising thing to me as a software engineer is there's hardly any standards there to do this. We implemented a World Business Council for Sustainable Development standard called PACT, the Pathfinder framework, but the world of standardization needs to drive forward very much to be able to really implement things. So that's maybe another call also to the scientific community, but also to vendors like us. We need to drive common standards much more than what we have today. And I'm not talking about legal standards and just, how do you say this, intentions. I'm talking about standards that are specified such that they can really be implemented down on the technical level. So that's carbon. And just to make this a little tangible, again, I don't want to pitch this, but we bring several products to the table here to reflect on what I've been just talking about. So one example, one product we call Sustainability Footprint Management. The typical, very creative SAP naming policies. So it does what it says. It calculates product carbon footprint and corporate carbon footprint at scale. Now, when we introduce this to organizations, typically the question comes back, so why the heck do I need to calculate a product carbon footprint for my product? Some customers have 8,000, 10,000 products. Why do they have to do this? It's very simple. Number one, they will be pushed more and more to share their carbon footprint. So many organizations ask their suppliers, when we buy from you, give me your footprint. SAP does that, but also major other organizations do this out in industries like chemical. And then, of course, again, scratching heads on, oh, okay, what kind of footprint do we issue here? And is it based on the reality? And will we be under competitive pressure? Is our footprint higher or lower of that, what our competitors hand in? So that's one key driver, the need for transparency. The second driver is and we heard this before, we have to drive reductions, not just report on things, we have to drive reductions. Then where do you do this? Then you need to probably do an analysis on a product level. What are my most intensive parts? Where can I save? Where can I maybe even afford to shift? So that's another driver. And then having that on a corporate level, tapping deep into ERP is what we do here, right? So we use material flows and other data from the ERP systems to do this. Now, quickly, another key part is this data foundation I talked about. So we have a product which we call a Sustainability Control Tower. Think of this like a data lake or data warehouse for sustainability. In very simple terms, it's oversimplified, but we gotta find places now where you bring data together for sustainability purposes, and this is what we cover here, and we see a lot of demand because customers, again, they don't have this common data set. And then the last one, which I quickly want to touch upon, we talked about circularity. Now, there is not only plastic taxes in place, there is this famous extended producer responsibility obligations. Not sure if anyone heard about this. In Germany, this is part of the duale system, but unfortunately, this is different country by country. So in France, this is different than what we do in Germany, and this is a massive topic for many organizations who ship products with packaging into many markets, and then they have to handle these EPR fees, right? So it's just a very tangible business administration problem at hand, which we are solving here. But this product will evolve more into real material transition, bringing in more sustainable material into the flow and hopefully implement true circular processes over time. So I know I need to be quick, and I'm wrapping up here in a second. Don't get hung up on all of these terms. It's not important. I just wanted to introduce a few areas for you to see where are we investing in and where is the world going to. But the longer term goal would be we need to bring in digital solutions to solve some of these pressing topics like decarbonization, like waste management, like circularity. And then hopefully over time come to one place in the organizations where you bring in all sustainability data so that you can truly steer. You know where you are. You know where your reduction potentials are. And that's what we need to go to. And then, of course, being a technology shop, we are about to apply AI here, machine learning, other means to make intelligent use of these technologies moving forward. So that's in a nutshell what we want to do and where we are on the way, and these products are out. They are used by customers. Of course, there's a lot to be done, a lot of work ahead of us, but I feel we are also on the right track, and we get a lot of very positive feedback from our customers so that we finally really embed sustainability in business processes, and we handle these resources like other precious resources that we have in our world, in our ERP systems today. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much.
I'm really, really impressed. And I was just thinking how a merchant from the 16th century would feel when you tell him that you will put all his business marketing thing into a software or a machine. And I feel a little bit like that, you know, sustainability in a cloud. Okay. Yeah, please feel free to ask questions if you wish.
I see a few of my folks here in the ranks, so please feel free to bother them with questions in the break.
You can use the break, of course, as well. what I was wondering, I mean, just a simple question, but you know, in terms of, because you discuss numbers a lot, I guess. So how much is it of your overall company activity? Is it like 10% now or so? What would you say?
No, it's not
It's
that
not that
high
big.
yet, but we have a very substantial team. I mean,
Yeah, okay.
I can share this. We have 400 people on this.
Oh, okay, that was
so it's
okay.
It's substantial.
Yeah.
But of course, SAP overall has 100,000 people. But what you need to know is, I did not go deeper into this, it's not just these new tools, it's also really bringing this into procurement, finance, logistics. And this is where a much broader community in SAP is involved. And I'm not sure if here in Karlsruhe, for example, but I think over time you would need, for example, a real Studiengang for carbon accounting in the financial sense, right? You need to, we learned finance many years ago. This has to happen here in carbon accounting as well. By the way, if I tell a quick anecdote here, I've been asking some of the really old colleagues in SAP who created finance systems in the 80s and 90s, and I asked them, well, how was it with standards those days when you created finance? Because I'm seeing in sustainability, standards are not far enough so that we can really just go and implement what's written up. And they said, hey, Gunther, you think that was different 20 years ago? It was the same. Even finance didn't have those standards. And it took a long time until IFRS and others became to such a maturity. So my call, including the scientific community here, would be, let's work to drive these standards further, really in a tangible specification way so that we can truly come to a level of sophistication like what we have in finance today.
There's one question, and then we have to proceed, please.
Just a quick question. You mentioned in the beginning that roughly 80% of the CO2 footprint is related to scope 3. Is it a personal estimation? Is it your experience, or from where did you get this figure?
Yeah, that's good. It ranges very much by industry. I hesitate to give you one number, but in automotive, for example, because I don't know what the English term for it is, but the Fertigungstiefe is not really very high in automotive, so then you have a very high degree of scope 3. By the way, the scope 3 concept, of course, is undergoing substantial changes, is causing a lot of headache for many organizations, because you got to make a lot of assumptions about the folks before you in the chain and the folks after you in the chain, and that's not easy financially speaking. So is scope 3 a significant portion? Absolutely. It's probably 40–50% in almost all industries, but then in some even more. So we got to tackle it, but again, the idea is not that I'm making assumptions about your scope, but that you share your scope with me, and then I can build upon what you share, like what we have in finance, that we have reliable numbers, because there will be audits, there is checks and balances in this system, and quite frankly, we also have to prevent greenwashing, right? Today, if you look at greenhouse gas protocol, it still leaves you a lot of room for interpretation. And I see some nodding heads here. So, but when you move forward towards a financial system where you have checks and balances and things have to add up, then there is less room for interpretation. Can you still greenwash your stuff then? Probably yes, but it's harder. And that's what we also want to achieve.
Okay, thank you once again. It was very interesting talk and comments. Thank you very much. Very impressive. Now, we have one partner who cannot be here today. In the program you have seen that Ulrich Hane, who is the managing director of Herrenknecht AG, also a world-leading company. He wanted to talk today, but he was actually called to another very important meeting in the last minute, basically, so he could not even send a replacement. We will actually try to have a recorded talk in our portfolio then for our YouTube distribution. But this is also why we have some time left, and we had some extra time. But the last talk today, last but not least, is also by a world-leading company, by Schneider Electric. And if you don't know it, it's maybe because you are not in the field. But Schneider is a world leader in electronics and electro technologies, based in France, which is also part of my background, so I knew Schneider also from France. And the Vice President Strategy Europe Operations, Ms. Cordelia Thielitz, is here today, and she will talk. For her background, she worked also at Rolls-Royce before, she worked at Bosch before, she studied actually also in Paris, but also in Berlin. And I'm very much looking forward to your insider view from such a big company, how you address sustainability as a driver and game changer in Schneider. Please, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here, and as said, I'm representing Schneider Electric. So for me, talking about sustainability almost feels a bit like a home run, literally. It's a really very original, genuinely, seriously taken topic within Schneider Electric. Now, exactly as Professor Orphal said, so Schneider Electric, especially in Germany, is not a big name, unfortunately, but we're going to change this. But we're actually, I always call us the French Siemens Energy, actually. So like 35 billion euro company, 150,000 employees all over, super global, not being French-centric, I would say, but really, truly global. And it was already in 2005, actually, that our long-standing CEO, by the time, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, actually, in 2005, envisioned Schneider to take a leading role in this space. And talking about Schneider, so we are basically about electrical distribution. So we do everything, so energy management, energy efficiency, electrical equipment, and industrial automation. This is what we normally do. So everything from the switches and socket, low voltage, medium voltage, transformers, this is our day-to-day business. So we are very, very deep in this topic. So and it was in 2005 that actually Jean-Pascal Tricoire really lifted this topic of sustainability onto the plate and made a company commitment about it. And you know, before coming here, I actually used ChatGPT to look at the buzzwords of 2005. And you know what I found? In 2005, the concept of value proposition was born. It was about disruptive innovation. It was a lot about quick wins, low-hanging fruits, ROI. So actually quite opposite to sustainability. And I still find it like really remarkable, like him coming up with that idea. And now that we have a German CEO, actually Peter Herbeck, his heart is just beating with the same amount of energy, I would say, for this topic of sustainability. So Schneider, starting to say like, and I fully concur with what my pre-talker Gunther was talking about. 100%, we are even customers, so I fully confirm and I totally tag along. But I want to share with you what actually, when we say sustainability, what does it mean? So it's definitely not just energy, even so this is our home turf, but it is very holistically, we tackle this concept very holistically. So we tackle this on the one hand side from a social perspective. So it is about equity, as we say. It is about diversity, about gender equality. It is about like working conditions. It's definitely the economic impact. So really trying to bridge, as we always say, profitable growth, because this is what business at the end of the day is about. We have to earn money. So it's like, how can we actually develop our businesses, products, hardware, software, services in that context? And of course, it is also about the environmental protection. So we want to make sure that in our own manufacturing plants, and by the way, there are 13 in Germany alone and hundreds all over the world, that in our own plants, we make sure that our carbon footprint is low, that the working conditions are good, that we are really, that our people are in good hands, because we also believe in the concept that well-being and a sense of trust, etc., is really contributing to productivity. And maybe I should move forward with the slides. So, and I wanted to share, standing here today, and I know that I'm just in between now and lunch break, so I try to focus on the essentials. But what I want to focus on really and share with you is how we do it as Schneider, like what we have implemented and how we live it. And we are facing exactly the same problems that we just discussed and that we just heard SAP talking about. So there's these 5 guiding principles that we have in general. So if we want to be truly sustainable in all of those 3 dimensions that I mentioned, then performance is the key. And performance is the key in our product. So whatever we do, whatever we sell, and we are, not a foundation like Bosch, but we are really hardcore, publicly traded company. Every quarter we have to deliver our profitability. We have to deliver high EBIT. This is what we are measured by. So we have to make a continuous effort to really work on our product, on the value propositions, and make sure that we earn the money so that we can then spend it on investing in sustainability and at this holistic and super comprehensive level. Then the second part is, as a paradigm, all stakeholders are involved. And this really starts with us, as we always say, so it's the individual in both business space and private space. So there's inside the company really extensive marketing campaign, communication campaigns, awareness campaigns, like why do we do it? So really to make sure that it's, and that is also a key principle of Schneider, and I think it's quite remarkable that we can keep this up, on the one hand being this hardcore capitalistic, really making profit, making money, but at the same time to really balance with what we do and enabling also our business for the next generations to do it in the same way. So all stakeholders starts with us, with the people, with our own production, like living by example, again, decarbonizing, defossilizing, like our own plans and introducing energy efficiency, etc. And I will have a couple of examples later. So starting with us, but also with any of our suppliers, customers, we need to know exactly what's happening with our products, like how can we help our products in operation to reduce the carbon footprint at the end of the day. And it's also to educate and influence our partners. And we also always say that Schneider is a big partner company, so we are not necessarily 100% developing everything ourselves or bringing everything ourselves to the market, but we use a lot of partners, taking them on this journey. And in that sense, we are also now expecting from our partners to come along with us. In order to be our partner, you need to set yourself significant and serious ambitions, measures, transparent, that are targets that are being measured and followed through. And I already mentioned it's about all ESG dimensions, a key point. And then it is about our business. And here, and I'm already jumping a bit to the conclusion, but that is an interesting part, because Schneider Electric started 18 years ago with this activity. We have been facing this problem of what does it actually mean? Where do we get the data? How much carbon is inside our products? Where do we source our energy from? How is electricity and heat, etc., what we need made? Where do we get the plastics from? So all of this, we have created our own, again, standards not available, our own metrics, our own implementation. So we have really achieved quite a high level, I would say, of learnings on, and have an understanding, actually, of what were good ideas that we can now roll out and what are really shady ideas that we want to forget rather quickly. And this now actually becomes a business even for Schneider, because we are able to provide consulting services, to provide tools, to provide concepts to our partners, to our suppliers, even to our own customers. So we have, and that is, I think, a very interesting journey, and I think we had it also in today's discussion a bit. We are not, in this hierarchical relationship anymore when it comes to sustainability on this is me, this is my product, and I get from you. But we are it's like the energy system. It's not unidirectional anymore, but it's multidirectional. So we are, at the same time, a supplier, as well as we are a customer, as well as we are a partner. And this is what we have to strengthen. And then, of course, in that whole context, we are also competitors. And we also have to, find our own reason to exist. But we are able to create a business out of this, and even our partners are now, with what they have learned, are able to then even educate further in their own value chains. And we call this actually, we have a whole business unit, which is the sustainability business, which is consisting of, and again, you know, it was learning by doing, it was really developing it from scratch. So it's a team of, at the end of the day, consultants, data analysts, and people that literally on their knee crawl through the production sites, buildings of our customers, of suppliers, of partners, to identify what are the steps that would need to be taken in order to achieve decarbonization, energy efficiency, in order to achieve all the other dimensions also of ESG, and then sorting by how much money do we actually have to invest in order to achieve. And then you get a whole list of measures, and as you can imagine, some of those measures, they have a very short return on invest, and it's a no-brainer. And then some of those measures, they really, you know, when we talk, I give you an example on microgrid, which is another topic that's very dear to my heart, where you have, you know, when it's about like integrating heat pumps, integrating chargers, integrating batteries in order to optimize your supply side, basically, optimize where you get the energy from. So it's heavy investments. So you can rank, and you are in a discussion with your network on which measures you take, which ones to postpone, and then also you see how a set of certain activities and measures that a commercial building can undertake, or a manufacturing plant, a chocolate factory, a beer brewery can do, and how a couple of measures are, you know, just like a nice set and positively influencing each other, and some activities are just very standalone, you know, you just do it and that's it. So this is what we mean with business, and I can also just emphasize and reiterate also that data and tools are key. So, and this is what needs to be there. And then model and culture, and that is again something where, and you said it, this is my third company that I was working in, and I'm really so proud about the honesty. So when we talk about the sustainability, the culture, the way it is really, it's in the targets of people, it's in the targets of our country presidents to make sure that sustainability is not just a buzzword. And that is, you know, there are so many buzzwords around and nothing behind. And it's also hard into this level for partners, for stakeholders to really judge on what is just, you know, like a shishi topic and what can we really do. So I give you an example. For instance, our employees and the managers at every hierarchical level have sustainability targets, and bonuses are also linked to fulfilling sustainability targets. So it's not just about revenue, and it's not just about profitability, but it's also to make sure that you have, for instance, an activity in your community to clean riverbeds, or to help elderly people, or to, you know, and that is also fostering the community in that specific country, in a certain department. So it created a whole culture where, again, we come back with we start with ourselves, you know, with that famous man in the mirror, like what can we do? And again, because human beings by nature are apparently a bit lazy, so we stick significant targets to it that are, again, like bonus relevant. And I think that really makes a difference, because that is, you know, the pain in our butt, and in order to get this done. And it can be small things like planting trees. We have, for instance, also in our manufacturing plants, often, you know, there's wasteland that's not really being used for anything. So there we try to, you know, get bees in, or, you know, do like some sort of reforestation. So those are examples, and it may sound a little bit esoteric, but again, it's connected to money, and that's, I think, why it works. So I think I've already pretty much covered, and it's an important point to say that as Schneider in our own plants, we look at all those 3 dimensions of sustainability. And on the part of environment, and I really want to make also one point, you may know that it is in buildings where 60% of our energy is being used. And it's in buildings where 40% of this energy is being wasted. And in our own commercial buildings that Schneider owns, you go to the Regensburg manufactory, for instance, for medium voltage switchgear, or our headquarters in Paris, or in Grenoble. So like huge, really big commercial buildings, and they are not necessarily new. But what is actually interesting is how much you can actually decrease the consumption and decrease the waste by deploying rather simple, not so expensive means. So you don't have to immediately think of a battery in and heat pump, etc. Of course, that's great, but it's actually by putting just a couple of sensors, by improving the building management systems to really, through sensoring, getting these data, and as we always say with software, making the invisible visible, understanding where do I actually waste energy? Are the lights out when people leave the plant? Do I really need to have everywhere 22 degrees C? Or how can I adjust this? With these measures, we could dramatically reduce the carbon footprint. And honestly, this is also a point personally where I don't get my arms around why this is so simple, it's so cheap, you have a payback within a year, and we don't do it, you know. This, in my mind, could be also from a political perspective, means that could be made mandatory. It's not expensive, it has an immediate payback, and it has such a huge impact. And again, buildings is where most of the energy is being consumed. So just as one example. And, you know, leading by example, so this was one of the paradigms, starting with ourselves. Now, it would not be honest to say we have done it in our 500 plus plants that we have, or 300 plus plants that we have. We are already there. Certainly not. So I think we can proudly say that we have far advanced when it comes to also, for instance, well-being, conditions of labor, conditions of work, equal pay. Equal pay, by the way, is a very important point, gender diversity, and I have a few more examples later. But of course, there's still things to do, but doing it ourselves, learning from it, and then requesting also our suppliers and partners to do this is a big thing for us. And for this, it took us to be able to have this additional whole new business, which is significant. You know, it is out of these 35 billion, it is reaching more than 2 billion in revenue. So it's not small, it's making money. And because it's consulting work, as it's people heavy, but it usually also comes with a quite nice profit. So in what we do, because as we heard from SAP, there are no standards, so we tagged along with those science-based targets from the UN Sustainability Goals. Out of those, we basically set our own 5 global targets. It also includes things like how much, for instance, I give you an example, as a German country president, so to say, is responsible to make sure that the manufacturing plants, that there is a roadmap to decarbonize the plants, to have a certain share in the revenue that is, for instance, as we say, impact-driven. So making sure that the products we sell are contributing, are sold specifically and consciously into projects where, for instance, wind farms are being operated, or PV farms being operated, or even nuclear power plants, actually. So we consider this as green too. And then there's these local targets, as I mentioned, where it is really about the local Schneider community, the people, where we do something together in order to help the sustainability not being a barren field or an empty word, but to really be something. Oh, this is super hard to read, but it's actually quite an important slide. I have to go there myself to actually remember. But these are our 11 targets, and this is what we find as bonus relevant, what we have to do. And I have to say that we set our targets 2021 to 2025. They are quarterly measured, and they are on an annual basis also updated, depending on how far we have come along. So one part is the so-called, as we say, green revenue. We claim today that we are at 70% revenue, meaning 70% of the revenue of our products, hardware, software, and services that we do are related to a business that is helping to decarbonize or to make businesses sustainable. We are around about at 70%. Then helping customers to save and avoid 800 million metric tons of CO2, 21 until 2025. We are at 480 at this point in time. This is at the end, I think, 4 times the number of Germany, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a huge number. It's a huge number. Reducing carbon footprint with our suppliers. So here we actually created a program for our top 1,000 suppliers where we request, this is in order to get on the journey to become Scope 2 and Scope 3 also relevant. So we request our top 1,000 suppliers to come with us on a journey, to set targets. We, again, come in, we can consult them. They don't necessarily have to come with us, to us. They can, you know, it's all open. Schneider is very much about open source, you know, open technology, like whatever it takes. But what we expect, and if they want to deal with us, we expect them to also have that same mindset, because it really takes a village, as they say, to make it happen. And in the beginning, in 2021, when we started to formalize the program, 70%, exactly as SAP was telling us, 70% of our partner suppliers, they had not even a clue on how their carbon footprint is, or how to measure it, or where to get the data from. And in the meantime, in the last couple of years, 10% are actually already now on a good track, have clear targets, and are actually really there. In addition to that, we have created the Schneider, how do we call it, sustainability school. So we're also doing a lot of educating. So we have created a portal. Most of this is online. So in the sustainability school of Schneider Electric, you can actually log on. You subscribe basically, and you get free access to certain types of knowledge, of learnings, of KPIs, how it can be measured, like what is being tracked, how you do it, and then specific types of advice actually on how you do it. It's primarily webinars, so it's really sharing of knowledge that we have created in the past couple of years. So there's a bunch of examples actually that I think you see here. I'm just trying to find on green materials, by the way. This is one that is, where is this? This is a little bit harder. We are only at, we started out at 7%, and the goal is to make sure that our product is made of green materials, biodegradable plastics, for instance. So 50% is the goal until 2025. Right now we are at around a little bit over 20. Here also, to give one specific example, what we try to do with ocean plastic is that we have formed partnerships where we basically take old fisher net, basically, you know, that is swimming around on the ocean. We don't go exactly on the sea, but we gather it on the beaches, basically. And we have a Dutch company that is giving us the granulate, basically, the plastics granulate out of these ocean plastic stuff. And so there's part of this example. Plus, we have created the Schneider Foundation that is funding and providing funds at the end of the day, money into other companies that do good things, so to say. And what we have committed to is that for every kilogram that we sell of our switches and socket that have ocean plastic inside, we spend, what is it? I think it is €1 per kilogram to another like startup, actually, a German startup that is collecting dump and plastics and garbage out of rivers, actually. So we were always trying to close the loop, kind of making money with really good, high standard, innovative switches and sockets. You know, you have it everywhere. doing this with ocean plastic, but then still connecting this with a bigger sense of sustainability and trying to support these startup or community activities that otherwise usually miss the means of really making an impact. So those are small things, but the good thing is with a big company, if it happens at a lot of places, it starts, to create a momentum and a mass momentum. And I think we are reaching that stage. Another part that you can barely reach is about point number 8. This is about equality and gender diversity. So I was myself, until I joined Schneider, always in an environment where I usually found myself being one of the few women in the room or in the meetings. And being with Schneider, actually, that changed. That's really interesting. That really changed. So there's a clear goal, as we say, 30, 40, 50. That's the target, meaning 50% of workforce being female, 40% of frontline managers being female, 30% of leadership people being female. So is that good enough? Shouldn't it be like even more? Probably yes, but compared to the rest of Fortune 500 companies, is probably quite a good ratio. We are not yet there, but we are reaching actually 41% in terms of hiring already today. And we have 25% frontline managers being female, which is great. And we are about like 23% in the leadership. So still room to go. But this is targets. And it's important that, again, these targets are bonus relevant. So we have to work for it. And I think this is what makes a difference to, at the end of the day, to truly formalize it and moving on with it. So I think as a result of these 18 years of work in that direction, of probably also to some sort, awareness creation and brainwashing in a positive sense and creating insights and understanding, coming with facts, I think, as we also heard from Daniela in the very first report today. We are, of course, happy that this is also being recognized and that we are, and it used to be 2021, the leader from Corporate Knights. We are partners, we are partnering with various of these associations, and it's nice to be recognized. And it's only fueled, it's an approval, basically, of us moving on further down this road. And maybe I think there's only 2 more slides. It's just reiterating on what I said. So as Schneider Electric, we are not yet there. We haven't yet reached where we need to be, but we have a clear plan forward on our so-called net zero roadmap that is literally crossing all the scopes. I think we're doing really well. We are on track on our 2025 targets in most of the areas, not in all, but in most of the areas on track where we need to be. And then, as we all know, scope 2 and 3 is way more difficult. It's, again, lack of standards, lack of data, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And the approach that we choose is strategize, digitize, and decarbonize. And this is pretty much what I tried to say in my earlier examples. We look into, let's say, customer facilities, into buildings, into manufacturing plants. This is primarily our scope. Also even into, by the way, into grids, into electricity distribution transmission grids, where you also have huge losses of energy. And there is technologies there that is available today. That's actually the best part of sustainability, when